Courtesy, everyone. Excited to be here. So we have about 25 minutes to go through a bunch of stuff, so I'm going to move fairly quickly. What I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to give you a primer into the intersections between crypto and neurotech. I'll make the case initially of why accelerating neurotech is extremely critical in the next 10 to 20 years. Then we'll talk about crypto networks and capital. And then we're going to talk about cryptography and computer security when it comes to neurotech. So clearly there's a lot of it here. Each bullet point here could be an entire conference. So this is really just to give you an overview and primer for you to then go and think about this and learn about it separately. After I get through this, Niamh will come up and talk about one of the projects that we're working on together, which is it really goes in here. So this will be a setup for Niamh's section. So I'm going to start by pulling from a talk that I gave at ZooConnect about a year ago exactly, on kind of why neurotech matters. And here I won't go into detail. You can find the video on there, but I'll just kind of give you like the surface level view into this. There's a lot of different reasons why people care about neurotech. Everything from how to repair ourselves. Like when you think about humans, we have all kinds of diseases and problems, and whether it's because you have some genetic issue, or because you have some environmental issue, or because you have some actual set of accidents or whatever, you might end up with a bunch of damage. You want to be able to repair that damage, and neurotech can help with that. So everything from better self-regulation, repairing connections for motor control, better sensory perception, all kinds of things. So there's all kinds of devices in neurotech that are really about repairing ourselves. Then once you kind of cover that use case, we go into enhancing ourselves. That means when you think about humanity, it's just kind of like an accident of biological history of why we have the particular senses that we do, why we behave the way that we do, and so on. When you think about the long-term arc of our species, or beyond our species, of our tree of life in a sense, there's no reason why we couldn't have all kinds of other abilities when it comes to the laws of physics or the universe. You can think of creating new kinds of, first off, you can start by enhancing our senses. So we only look at a very narrow part of the visual spectrum. It would be amazing to be able to see a much wider breadth of the actual light spectrum. It would be amazing to be able to hear the whole sound spectrum. That could be pretty amazing, and be able to tune it. It would be amazing to be able to enhance our thinking and be able to tap into the vast resources of computation that we have. It'd be amazing to be able to enhance our movement. So think about like being able to like fly, like actually literally fly with different mechanical devices and so on. And then there's enhancing our connectivity to computers. So this is like really literally connecting your brain to the internet, or being able to enhance our connectivity between humans. So this is really literally telepathy. Like this is not that far away. Being able to interact and interconnect how we think. You can think of like the internet of brains. Like that's not actually, it was science fiction in the 20th century. It's going to be science fact in the 21st. And then we're going to also talk about interconnecting with AIs directly. We're building all of these different digital systems in silicon that are extremely capable and intelligent. It would be really great to be able to graph those onto ourselves as additional layers of our cortex, as opposed to creating a separate species. So I'll talk about that in a bit. So that's kind of like, all of this is still looking at our biological version of humans. Then there's a whole other layer which goes into, we actually will have the capability of digitizing ourselves. So that means everything from being able to measure and map the interactions of our neurons. And of course, you can extend this to the rest of the body if you wanted to. But being able to measure and emulate the brain then enables you to actually simulate and emulate an actual human inside of a digital environment, which totally changes the dynamics of what it means to be a human, of course. But it really has a bunch of advantages, right? You can then start, you get the capabilities of a digital program, which means that you can save state, you can snapshot, you can fork, you can sleep for long periods of time. You can, if humanity ever makes it to other stellar systems, it'll be as a digital organism, not as a biological organism. It's extremely difficult to get matter, like our bodies, out of this gravity well and in deep cryo for like hundreds of years to some other stellar system. Like that just isn't really going to work. Digital humans are likely the way that we will kind of grow. There's a lot of thinking about this kind of thing. Then you get into all kinds of questions about like what does it mean to have emulated humans? What does it mean to have like digital societies and so on? This I don't particularly. So I plug this book because it's one of the things that has thought about this landscape. I don't particularly agree with the conclusions and outcomes here. I think there are much more optimistic versions. Then you can also think of this as a path to humanity, or really beyond humanity, Earth, the living tree of Earth, achieving the leveling up in the Kardashev scale and so on. So this is really about like the next step in human evolution if we are to survive. That is a big question mark in this century, which sets us up for the next part, which is that currently we're co-evolving with AI. But it may end up being that we take a different path. So if we invest in neurotech deeply, we can then follow this path, and we can actually co-evolve with these systems, and those become an extension of ourselves, and we upgrade ourselves as opposed to creating a competitive species. There's also, in what I kind of like already went into this a little bit, but in addition to exploring the universe, you could actually get to survive planetary extinction events. Surprise, there's been like 7. We're the 7th biggest planetary extinction event. There's been 6 before that were really terrible. And humanity today just would not survive one of those at present. So being able to survive that eventually means digitizing and so on. If we want to go into like the long-term future, like that's, the sun is going to engulf the Earth. It'd be great if we are not around when that happens. Cool. So that's kind of like the reasoning for why. Most of the latter part here, of course, is much more, sci-fi is the wrong word because this is not fiction. This is more deep thinking about the future and what our potential might be in the way that maybe people 2,000 years ago were maybe thinking about how some of the connectivity between people could actually translate into much bigger civilizations and all that kind of stuff. But for the, in the short term, this is, extremely good reasoning as why you want to do neurotech. And then I think a number of people now are open to this idea. I think in general, the mainstream perspective just gets really queasy and scared about this sort of thing, because this, of course, runs into these other things. And so I think that it's going to be really important over the next 10 to 20 years to make it okay for humans to want to improve themselves. Cool. So now let's talk a little bit about the kind of like downside risk scenarios. So we live in a very unstable world at the moment. It wasn't as unstable 10, 20 years ago. We're now entering a period of deep instability, primarily because of AI. So there's other things like the geopolitical instability that we have and all that kind of stuff, but AI is really the kicker that just throws all of that into a much bigger problem space. This graph is what I consider to be the most important graph for humanity today. It is a plot of computational complexity and time, and these are estimates and actual measurements of the computing landscape, and these are estimates of the computational complexity of what it would take to digitize an actual human, depending on different assumptions of what you require. Meaning, if you kind of solve the brain, you would kind of be over here. If you can't reason at all about the brain and you are like simulating entire single molecule behavior, I don't think that's needed, then you're over there. But this really means that in this time frame, we're going to figure out how to digitize a human. And of course, if you can digitize a human and actually have a human AI in a computer, certainly you can do an artificial neural net. And so this, when I started talking about this, like maybe a few years ago, everyone was like, sure, of course, that'll never happen. But now post ChatGPT or GPT-4, everyone is actually taking this way more seriously, because you can really feel how the models are getting very close to AI. So this graph, in a sense, gave Kurzweil, Sandberg, Bostrom, and so many other people the confidence in being able to make predictions about when exactly we would see AIs. Most predictions end up in like the 2026 through 2045 landscape. I think that's highly accurate. Hopefully we can get some digital humans at the same time. So AI is kind of like taking over a lot of things. I won't go into detail there. We are close to generating a full artificial general intelligence. Once we do that, people guess that it'll be a very fast step change between that and a superintelligence. Superintelligence here means an AI model that is just vastly superior in capability to regular humans. This graph over here, I think, is pretty good in terms of giving you some humility about perspectives that are like pessimistic about how quickly AI can improve. These graphs show the capability of AI models across different types of tasks, and how quickly you go from an AI model being completely incompetent and incapable to surpassing humanity. And this is usually months to a year. And so once you get a model that like starts doing good in it, you enter this like huge exponential or like really logistic path. And the only reason why these taper off and they don't keep increasing is because usually once we pass superhuman ability, the labs just stop working on that, because it doesn't really help to just like beat humanity into the dust, right? Like if DeepMind had invested vast billions of dollars into training an even better chess engine or an even better Go engine, like the moves would be just so astonishingly better than humans. Humans would feel crushed by this, and it would freak people out. So usually this is why you get this tapering, because as soon as you pass humans, labs move on to the next problem. But this actually is not really bounded this way. This could be dramatically higher. So you can imagine a whole range of other tasks coming over here that'll follow this trajectory. It requires a lot of hubris to claim that this won't happen. Then on the other landscape, you can talk about the scale up. There's a thing known as the scaling laws, which is that as far as we know, over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen that the current architecture of models that we have, without dramatic algorithmic improvements, maybe you can claim the transformer was the only one, without very significant algorithmic improvements, we've just seen this smooth scalability of the models reaching higher and higher and higher degrees of intelligence. And so there's a strong guess that that'll likely continue for the next 10 to 20 years, or at least the next 10 years. And if that happens, most researchers deep in the weeds of this expect that at that point we'll actually surpass humans. And so that means that this is not actually that far away. This is like fairly close. To make matters even more complicated, we're now in the process of realizing that these models are actually good enough to power robots. And so in order to do that, because by the way, like the optimistic case here is humans no longer have to do extremely dangerous, life-threatening work. We can automate a lot of parts of our economy. We can decrease poverty. We can increase access to all kinds of resources. We can move the entire species up the Maslow's hierarchy. So really, really good things can come out of this. But at the same time, we're building humanoid fleets and other kinds of robotic fleets that suddenly will start actually contending with humans in all kinds of things. And the moment that you have these robots, the entire history of computer security and computer network security, which I'll get to in a moment, shows how easy it is to hack into these things and take them over. So this, in my perspective, is like just like we should really not be doing this until after we figured out the AGI-ASI transition, because this is just going to make things like very dangerous. But the economic landscape is the economic landscape, and unless we are able to warp the incentives, this is just going to happen. So this is why neurotech is so important, because currently humans are greatly rate limited and just kind of not competitive with these models. And the best path to success is for humans to level up. So this means enhance humans with the ability to interconnect with computers, interconnect with each other, and then take what today is a species level question, like humans versus machines, into a, hey, it's just humans upgrading humans story. And so this to me is like the strongest path to human survival in the long term. And then from here, which is first starts with brain-computer interfaces, we get into whole brain emulation, digitizing humans, and at that point it's really just one continuous smooth species, one tree of life, without a big like species level fight. All of this to mean, hey, we're living in a very unstable world right now. There's a lot of different potentials over the next 5, 10, 20 years. And we can imagine many different possible futures. And it really is going to require people like you orienting to pick the safe outcomes by building them. So throughout history, the way in which different technologies and different events come to pass is because there are groups of people actively working on those paths. Things don't just naturally go well. And in many different technologies, you can point to their trajectory and how the value systems of the people that build those technologies ended up influencing how the trajectory went. So, sorry, that was like a lot for the first section. It's probably the heaviest piece. I'll like just go through this like fairly quickly and then turn it over to Niamh. So let's talk about like crypto networks and capital. So accelerating crypto. So hopefully I've convinced you that accelerating neurotech is really critical. Doing that, today this is roughly the trajectory that I would expect. Where today we're starting to digitize, worms and flies and so on. Mouse is like the next big result. Maybe we'll get that by 2030 by default, then primates, then humans. But that's not really as low as it needs to be. This is actually what I consider to be possible, potentially even compressing it. If we had a Manhattan-level project where like you're tooling an entire nation into doing this, you could even accelerate it. But that's just not likely to work economically or government-wise. And so this is kind of like roughly the timeline that I think is achievable. You could go faster than this, but unlikely. And so this is kind of like what we should be shooting for. And the thing that prevents this is primarily capital. We've seen a bunch of examples of doing extremely fast R&D, and we need to apply this kind of process. This means we need, in this time frame, significant breakthroughs in imaging and recording, modeling approaches, simulation and evaluation, then scalable integration of a bunch of these systems. And in order to organize this, we need organizational structures that can do this. So this means better labs, assembling researchers, assembling really high-functioning teams. There's a thing called FROs, I won't go into it now, that's potentially a good approach. Startups that are able to achieve capital is good. But just in general, just to remind everybody, this is roughly the scale of capital required to do these kinds of hard R&D endeavors, right? So you can usually start with low millions of dollars and start kind of like some small proofs of concept, but if you really want to do large-scale technology development, you start hitting the billions in scale. And today, in the world that we live, this is mostly the way to do this is by building strong technology companies that are able to build a product and sell it. I'm not arguing that that's like fundamentally the better way to do things. I'm just saying today, practically speaking, if you want to build technology at scale and diffuse it to the world, to as many people as possible, this is the way to do it. Really, it requires like this kind of scale of capital. Just remember that fields accelerate very quickly once you start showing results. So this was the deep learning field, not that much investment, and then suddenly, boom. Once AlexNet and other results happened, everyone like realized that this stuff was very powerful, and you saw this great acceleration. There is that level of capital available in VC level funding, although this is not coming from venture capital funds because those can't really afford R&D at this scale. With AI labs, we got this coupling between very powerful AI labs or ambitious AI labs and specific technology companies. And so the people that are funding these labs are the groups with the most capital in the world, which happen to be the current established large tech companies. And many people are like, well, couldn't governments fund this? The short answer is no, actually. Government funding is just not remotely close to the level of free cash flow that these large tech companies have. Governments are fighting extremely hard for very small slices of budgets, and just in general, most of the R&D funding today is coming from industry, not for federal budgets. This is the US, which is the biggest funder of R&D in the world. The rest of the world is maybe multiplying this graph by 4. It really doesn't cut it. So government funding can help accelerate some of the tech, but it's really going to require industry to do it. So this is the rough outcome. If we want to get to this, you can maybe start with philanthropy and angel investors, prizes and things like that, which we'll talk about in a moment. Then you really need to leverage VC for a bit to then move into causing the largest pools of capital in the world, which are free cash flow pools of capital, which are tech companies, to then fund this. Now, this is where crypto comes in. I think that this landscape doesn't consider the crypto network angle. Crypto networks have shown to be one of the fastest ways of forming and orienting capital that we've seen in maybe since the invention of a joint stock company. And these show just a tremendous capability in being able to organize thousands to millions of people in various ways and forming huge amounts of capital. So it could be that crypto gives us an angle in being able to solve this capital problem that doesn't put this in the trajectory and ownership level or direct influence of the current tech monopolies, which I think would be a huge benefit to the world. But it sort of remains to be seen whether we can do this. Maybe a lot of you know, I'm super deep into the public goods funding type ecosystem. I think that this is another great outcome of the crypto world. If we can build public goods funding type structures that can organize that capital and orient it towards the good outcomes that the people in that community want, this could be an amazing success. However, currently, public goods funding systems are in the tens of millions of scale, not billions. And so we need to scale these approaches to billions to then be able to apply these to this kind of problem. And maybe like another potential here is, I really do think that crypto networks today give us the ability to coordinate humans in a kind of unprecedented way. Today, when you think about most digital ways in which humans coordinate, we still do like very simple stuff, like social networks, Google Docs, like those kinds of things are like the predominant way by which humans coordinate. And we now have, because of the internet, this deep interconnectivity. So more experimentation in just ways of using social network type systems to orient people towards outcomes could be extremely powerful. Think of like GitHub as an experiment in this angle, where they just tuned a set of repositories with some social network features and gave us the best way of organizing the production of software in the planet. And so things like that could be applied to other problems. And so everything from doing research to many other problems that you care about. Like this is not specific to neurotech, but I think this has like very high possibility. So I'll touch on computer security briefly because I was asked to. I think more of what I'm talking about is like, this stuff is like way riskier than computer security type questions, but I'll touch on them just for completeness. Today the internet powers just so much of our lives. The technology that we've built is capable of providing these kind of like Orwellian systems, and you can build these like terrible Orwellian states once you have the level of capability that we've built now oriented towards like bad outcomes. And so it'd be really great to like prevent some like terrible Orwellian future. The way to do that is by it really comes down to just establishing better primitives and infrastructure for connectivity. So this means things like establishing digital human rights across a range of possible things, like everything from freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and so on. Take these ideals that we think are really critical and embed them into actual systems that people can leverage. So this means build networks and systems to accomplish these things. A bunch of us, ever since crypto became a thing, for the last 10 years, have been working towards this kind of vision. The good news here is that we've made a tremendous amount of progress towards this. Certainly an enormous amount more work to do, but this is like really possible, and I think deepened networks, for example, are a very concrete way of establishing this. One of the things that I think is possible now is you can actually build a internet access connectivity around the world in a deepened setting by leveraging the tools of capital formation of crypto, plus the broad coordination framework that you can get out of these networks to then build a Starlink competitor. So you could have like an actual Starlink competitor shipped out satellites around the planet and give internet connectivity access to everybody and bake in strong protection of human rights directly into the network. And so I think that this is within our control. Like we can build those kinds of things in the next 5 to 10 years. It just requires a lot of work to get there. Maybe the last thing I'll mention on this is to really like, once you combine this kind of possible future with the landscape where you are putting all of this data and you're connecting your actual brain to devices, today the way that we build computer systems is just so failure prone and hackable that today your computer gets hacked and maybe they still steal your information or steal money or whatever, or maybe impersonate you to get other people to do things. But once you start connecting our devices into things, you get into like, man, somebody hacked my arm and I can't use it. Or like somebody hacked my arm and it's punching me. Like we deeply need to improve the computer security story as these things appear. The good news here is that LLMs are actually extremely good at writing code, and we have formal verification tools already. So the big problem in computer security, which was like, how do we convince humans to write this like arcane, formally verified languages, and nobody wants to do that. That problem is now, I think, effectively bypassed. So we could get dramatically safer systems in the next 5 to 10 years if we want to build them. Now, of course, like the computer security story of digital humans is a whole other game, right? Like at this point, you're talking about like digital security of like a conscious human being, and like that's a whole other sort of thing. All right, I'm gonna stop here and let Niamh tell you about one of the projects that we're working on towards actually practically solving these questions and orienting people to success.
You did really well. All right, okay, so you've heard a lot today about whole brain emulation and how much we need it. You've also heard that we don't have it and how we're going to reach it. That's kind of exactly what we're doing. I want to make whole brain emulation real. I want to make it happen. So at Foresight Institute, we are raising a $20 million endowment currently so that we can build out this industry and shorten these timelines and, essentially accelerate whole brain emulation within short timelines. And so that's our key goal. We currently have an AI safety grant, which we re-grant 1.5 million each year. And with that, we've already funded a bunch of neurotech projects, including the very first whole brain emulation lab in London, which is a pretty big deal. And so they're currently working on mouse brains, which is pretty cool. And next year, we'll be launching our Lo-Fi Mouse Brain Prize, which will also be $1 million. And that's a really big deal because also we can shorten timelines by, I guess, incentivizing researchers to start working on it. $1 million is a lot of money. And yeah, we have like 3 or 4 projects currently that seem to be in the running for making that happen in the next 2 to 3 years. So yeah, whatever we can do to help them is kind of what we're here to do. So I'll keep it short and sweet because I know that time is of the essence. But if you'd like to come talk to me, please do. We still need to raise a fair bit. We've got a pretty incredible chunk thanks to Juan, Protocol, and Niamh. So if you'd like to join and help us, that would be incredible. And yeah, I mean, I just really, I care about whole brain emulation a lot and I really want to make it happen. And I'm sure you do too. I mean, how many other people here want to make this real? Put your hand up or stand up or something. Who's fearful of it? Yeah. And who wants to be in control of that narrative a little bit? I went to a really scary conference in DC where whole brain emulation was being discussed, but for a very different purpose, mostly about mind control from a military perspective. And for me, that was really unsettling, and I really want to be part of changing that narrative and ensuring that there's a really beautiful and beneficial outcome because I think that there's a lot that we can do. We have 180 billion neurons that have never been mapped in our own human brains. And actually by mapping it, essentially, we can help a lot of people today who suffer or maybe don't have what they need. So yeah, there's a lot that we can do in the short term as well by helping one another. Also, it's pretty cool that the fly brain 2 weeks ago got mapped for the first time. I don't know if anyone else has seen, but it's 139,000 neurons. And it's just really beautiful. So if you haven't watched it, you should because I'm in awe. And yeah, I mean, would anyone like to give to our whole brain emulation fast grants and grand prize? I mean, I haven't really explained how it's going to operate. Do I have time for that or not really? I'll be quick. Okay. I probably don't have enough time for slides, do I? I'm just riffing. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, we're looking to give 1.6 to 2 million each year off this endowment. And so it will be self-sustaining until whole brain emulation is finally reached, whole brain emulation of a human brain, which means the grand prize is 20 million. By having a $20 million prize, equally we can change the stigma around this research because obviously a lot of people think it's maybe a bit scary or icky and there's so that's what we're hoping to do. 1.6 million will be a lot. A lot of projects that we've been talking to are looking for grants from 10 to 300,000, and that's what we can provide. We can also have a spray effect, so we can fund multiple projects working on one small outcome hurdle hiccup in the road, and that way we can progress things quicker because as we know, every researcher finds different outcomes. And Foresight has an incredible community. We've now had, with our molecular machines prize, the Feynman prizes, we've now had 2 Nobel Prize winners come out of them. So that's a really huge deal, considering that we were the very first to give them their first $10,000 and pat on the back for their work. One won the Nobel Prize within 9 years of submitting the exact same essay, and one it took, well, 19 years, but you know, we're in it. And we also can understand through that, like, how important this research is, and like how important it is to be at the very front of it. So really proud of our community, seeing the same happen already with our AI safety grants. We know we're making a huge difference there, big impact. And my goal is that we'll be launching this in 2026. And it would be incredible if you could help me do that. So thank you so much, and I'll talk to all of you, please.
Hey, any questions for our friends from Protocol Labs and Foresight? Oh, okay. You were first, I think. You second.
Sorry. Are you guys familiar with Adam Ghazali's lab at UCSF and the glass brain, which he already,
Yeah,
and the work inside of Neuroscape?
yeah.
Yeah, so good.
It's cool. It's a little bit different, I believe. It's focusing more on like behaviors, right?
Well, it's actually map the brain with fMRI plus EEG. Yeah, those approaches are just in scale. So that approach works for a specific type of application. What we're talking about is mapping at a dramatically smaller scale, like many orders of magnitude smaller. We're talking about not mapping just the broad connectivity across ranges of neurons, but mapping the individual synapses of neurons and measuring the connectivity between those synapses. Because not all synapses are made the same; they have different degrees of strength. That's where the parameter space is, and so mapping that connectivity is like really key.
So I guess I was curious about the government spending slide. It seems like what you're indicating is that like these timelines are incredibly compressed, and we are living through like existential risk phase, and so therefore there should be a dramatic rethink of government spending that would free up a significant amount of capital. And so it seems like, given the timelines you're talking about, like some of the longer term spending things, like we should seriously be reconsidering like funding of Social Security, like other fundamental government spending projects in favor of something like this, if the timelines you guys are citing are accurate. Like, is that something that people are thinking about? Is that something you guys would support? I'm just so it seems like we need to be radical here, I guess.
Yes.
Since that was like since that was my slide, I personally think, and I'm dismayed by the fact that our government structures and our government attention to problems is tremendously backward, and it lives decades in the past as opposed to living decades in the future. And unfortunately, this is just the way in which government systems have evolved for good reason, right? So many of the governments today were built with all kinds of delay processes in them in order to inhibit the rapid change, because people in the 1700s and 1800s were very aware of how dangerous very rapid change in governments could be. They fought many wars, many revolutions over it. It's just that today, the technologies that we're building are changing the species at a pace that those processes are just ill-suited for. And so from my perspective, you could totally rethink both these budgets and how we do government systems. And the communities that are closest to that are actually the crypto networks. And that's one of the things that I find most exciting about this space, and why I think it's like, the pop-up cities movement, the network state movement, the public goods funding movement. All of those things are super exciting because we're prototyping things in small scale. And once they work, you can scale them very quickly. But yeah, I would totally, if I had a magic wand, I would totally rewrite the federal budget of tons of nations. But those are extremely fraught conversations with like deep deep problems. I mean, I'm personally super disappointed. Just like the level of the political conversation in most governments. I've spent a lot of my life in the U.S., and the last 8 years have shown me just how backward the conversation is. And it's just deeply, deeply unsettling. So the best thing you can do is try and orient what you can do and what you can control, and focus on what you can have positive impact on, and try to make that better. Whether that's by building the technology, by funding the technology, by changing government. Part of the reason why government is so backward in a bunch of ways is because there aren't that many brilliant people working on changing it. So, but the timelines there are just very weird. Trying to change the government is like a 20 to 30 year process. We'll have digital humans by then.
We can do it.
Okay, thanks to both. And Barnett.